Well, welcome to the Followup podcast. My name is Hayden. I am the worship director here at Arbor Church. Today, I am joined by Bryan Cobley, our students director. Nice. And Alison Oconee, our community care pastor and speaker from Sunday. Alison, this was your first time preaching in the Changes series.
Yes, it was.
You decided to... Are we already in a laughing mood? All right. You decided to talk to us about Ruth, which is the second woman that we've talked about in this series. The first being Hannah, which you mentioned in your sermon as one of your favorites.
I did. Yeah, I wanted to kind of do a look backwards at who we've already covered. And Hannah was awesome. I thought that was an amazing sermon. So,
yeah.
And I thought it was great to have a Sunday about a woman in the Bible, the woman pastor and staff preaching, announcements of women gathering, and and the youth pastor offending every woman in the sanctuary on one wonderfully packaged Sunday.
Bryan, yeah, you hit quite a mark with the announcements in the morning. So that was good.
Karen called me out.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate for our listeners?
If you weren't there, I was like just complaining and venting to the whole congregation about how fast my lawn is growing because of the constant rain, sunshine. And then people were like vibing with it. Like, yeah, I totally feel what you mean. And I was like, yeah, we should start a support group, Dads Who Mow. And as soon as I said that, there was some laughter, just some. But then Karen King goes, dads?
Right. And I could just see all the women who mow out there just like all of a sudden rising up in their seats a little bit. Like,
and
what did he just say?
I admitted my mistake. I said, that was bad. Thank you, Karen. I'm so sorry. But as I got off the stage and walked, I saw glares.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Annette, who's a woman gatherings at her house, go, I mow my own lawn, Bryan.
Yeah,
I was like, I bet you do.
Yeah, she does, man.
And then Karen Weber, same thing.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah.
You can't get away with anything around here.
Two Karens calling me out today.
Well, talking about caring for organics, that goes right into Ruth. We see that she found herself working in a field. Let's hop into the Ruth's truths.
That
was a yoga stretch to get to that.
No, it works.
Oh, it works.
It
Okay.
worked.
That really
okay.
That's good.
I love the organics part of it.
Yeah. Thank you. So Alison, you did a I'll call it clever, fun Ruth, or what is it? Truths from Ruth.
Right.
The rhyming, it felt very like.
You could have just said truths and like try to emphasize. Ruth.
Get it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Where were you when I was sermon prepping? All the helpful people.
You could have done lowercase t, lowercase s, and then just capitalized Ruth in the middle of it.
I'll get it next time, Coach. But this time it's truths from Ruth. It's just hard for me to not be cheesy when I speak sometimes with my organization because I think in ways that are like that. I categorize things like that. So I thought to myself, let's just share it with everyone. So
also no visual aid.
Yeah.
Right.
This was like your first Sunday with not having a prop on stage.
I know. I didn't stand behind anything or hid behind anything.
I don't even know if I even soaked in the message. Like, there wasn't a flashlight.
Did you have one takeaway at least?
The one takeaway.
Four. Okay, good. Okay.
4 truths.
The lack of totem really threw me for a loop. But I do really quickly just want to go through your truths from Ruth.
I want to see if I can get them. Be and Naomi. Was that the first one?
Not first.
That's number 2. That's Ruth Truth 2.
We went in backwards order.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it be a Ruth?
Have a Ruth.
Have a Ruth.
Be a Ruth.
Be a Ruth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then have a Boaz.
Nope.
No.
Just be a Boaz.
Be a Boaz.
Yes.
And then Ruth.
Nope.
And then Naomi.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really A plus work here.
Yeah.
I would know it if there was a visual aid, Alison.
Yeah.
And the first one was God.
Remember God's loving kindness to you. Yeah.
Right. He's the actual all-star of this book. Even though those other 3 have supporting roles, it's actually that God and his loving kindness is the main idea. So,
One of the things that I would like to get into before we hop too much into the message is I've heard sermons and I've heard Bible studies and Sunday school lessons, all of that on Ruth. And I also know that it's there's a large amount of women who really like this book, right? And I'm curious, not that I don't think Ruth is a good book. Ruth is just never like, I've never read it and been like, wow, that was amazing. I love that. So one of the things that I would like to hear from you, Alison, and Bryan as well, if you have some feelings towards the book, is what stands out or what is maybe your draw to that book or the story?
Ordinarily, Ruth has not appealed to me much as a character, TBH.
Okay.
So, like, just to be fully transparent, I have thought not much about her. I know that, like, the Jewish culture highly esteems Ruth.
Yeah.
And she's spoken of frequently and honored. I've kind of been a little meh about her. But when I spent time in her story, the whole concept of changes was what led me to her in the first place. Up till now in our Changes series, we've been looking at people who had a change in their life after an encounter with the Lord.
Yeah.
I wanted more to think about, like, well, what happens to people of faith when there are unwanted changes that happen in their life? Like, we need to be able to, as people of faith, work through seasons of change and hardship in a God-honoring way. And I think that was more what I was looking for a little bit. So Ruth's story appealed to me for that reason.
Yeah.
They had famine, they had death, they had, barrenness. They had like periods where they moved foreign countries and they were the outcasts.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, circumstances there look like lots and lots of change.
Yeah.
So check, she, qualified to be discussed.
Yeah.
But no, up till now, I hadn't really given her a whole lot of thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bryan, what about you?
One, I love the story, just in keeping in line with Jesus's genealogy.
Yeah.
There's actually three things. The genealogy I like. Two, I like the kind of culture to Christianity today of this story. Of I think Christians today, when there's somebody who is depressed, as Naomi was, so much call me Mara. Is that what it was? I love that.
Yeah.
Just the bitterness.
It's like, I can't even be called by my
woman.
She called it out.
I think if we, like 9 times out of 10, us who preach on stage, we tell people, if there's somebody who's like that, you as Christians, we need to keep like loving them and encountering them, and maybe they'll experience the love of Jesus. Maybe they'll even accept Jesus. In this story, that's opposite. The person who believes in God is the bitter one. It's the person who isn't, who's like, no, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then through that, somebody who actually lived more like Christ, more like God in this moment, ends up being in the family, the genealogy of.
So Ruth acting more like Christ, or Boaz?
Ruth acting more like Christ, saying like, I'm not leaving you.
Right.
I'm with you.
Right.
And it's so funny because it wasn't the God-fearer who was doing that. It was actually a foreigner.
Right.
And so it's just, I think it's a reminder to me of a lot of times in our culture today that some of the best people, the greatest people, aren't Christians. And sometimes we as Christians can be the bitter ones, like, oh no, leave me alone, don't want it. And there's really good examples, and who knows if even if we let those people in our lives, they can still, with our bitterness, maybe still encounter Jesus, which I think I say Don all the time. I love Don. That man was more sarcastic, and when I would go to him at church, he was a bitter old man too at the church.
Was he?
He was.
I thought he worked with children.
But that was like, I think Monday through Saturday was like the recharge to go like spend it. But like he did not like people that much. So he needed the recharge. So when we go to the office, he was just a hermit somewhere, and I'd always have to try and find him. And I always felt like I annoyed him, even though he would tell me I wasn't. But I'm like, gosh, I just feel like he's trying to get away. But I also need to know what am I doing today? I'm like your intern kind of thing. Yeah. But I just always found myself even drawn more and more to him. And my relationship with Jesus was growing while being around this kind of bitter old man, even though he was just full of love. But
Quick disclaimer for people who are half listening to that story: we were not talking about Don Pratt. We're talking about someone from Bryan's past experiences.
Sorry for listening to this, Don or Don.
Right. Names in this podcast are fictionalized.
Yeah.
The third thing that I really like about this story is this moment in the Old Testament was actually, I don't know how many thousands, I think maybe 1,000 years later, a few thousand years later, was actually the reason that the early church started the first deacons / like elders, was the mistreatment of widows.
Oh.
Yeah, that was like, they were like, hey, since this whole Christianity thing happened, widows
Right.
aren't cared for. Like, what do we do? And that's when he said, hey, let's appoint people. Who are 7 people that you would want to appoint. So you go back to even this Old Testament story, how much widows were cared for, taken care of.
Yeah.
Like, I just see this story and immediately flash forward to the New Testament. I'm like, yeah, that's where there was a huge failing happen, where we see it lived out. Like, they were cared for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've always been a priority of God's.
Mm.
Just a note about Mara, or the bitter name. I left that out. I cut it from my script.
Wow.
I know. I'm like
just an actor up here.
I know.
Yeah.
Out of my text, because I didn't want to go too. I was careful of time. But I did take note of the fact that she was emotionally really honest with her community about how she felt. And she actually was pointing to God's sovereignty over the fact that it was God who had taken away these people out of her life, and she felt lonely and empty as a result. So I think that opens up a really, really big conversation, not for here, but in a believer's life, is the role of the Lord, when he gives and takes. We're all really good about the gives, like, oh yeah, give us babies, give us husbands, give us,
Money.
long life. And then if it's removed from us is when we're not so down for that,
Yeah.
But Mara's, or Naomi's, emotional honesty with her community allowed them to minister to her. So I don't know. I appreciated her honesty.
Yeah.
No, you presented it so funny, like when you said that.
Oh, that Ruth.
Yeah, after Ruth's like, where you go, I'll go. Your God will be my God. Just call me bitter.
I went away full. Now I'm empty. And then Ruth is like, hey. Just me and my devotion to you.
Amanda and I were cracking up on the side.
I know, it just struck me funny too. But
but I wanted to see if I got a fact correct, because I heard this and I'm like, wait, am I hearing this correctly? Because it's really cool. If this was true. You were teaching the history of when a husband would die, then down the line. Can you go into further detail?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say what I thought you said. I just want you to say it again to see, like,
oh, weird.
I did capture it again.
Okay, so kinsman redeemer is the term, and the concept is that the family line matters in that, like, we've all heard, like, the house of Judah, or the tribe of Judah, or the tribe of Benjamin, or whatever. Like, these lineages mattered to these ancient families and these ancient people. So if your husband died, it was a priority to continue his name, or the family name. So they had set up this kinsman redeemer sort of thing, where you would marry the next in line, which was the younger brother, or the next younger brother. And if there was no younger brother, then you check out the family tree and see who's next. The weird part, and I likened it to the Queen, because she's just had her jubilee.
I also learned a lot about royalty on Sunday. Yeah, where I'm like, I didn't know these names.
It's a big week in Britain because of the Queen. So, but if she passes her crown down to the next in line, and then there's a succession. So, the thing that I cut also from the script was the fact that Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. That he was able to step into that place, but there was somebody who was even closer to Ruth. And so Boaz was full of integrity, and instead of cutting in line, he went and had a conversation with that guy who was the next in line. And he was like, hey, so it's you, if
Yeah.
you want it to be you, you'd have to buy the field, or there was some sort of land or property that came to. And the guy actually just took himself out. He was like, no, you do it. And so
Yeah.
Boaz, with integrity, could step into the role of the kinsman redeemer and purchase the land and have Ruth as his wife. So is that what you had understood?
So I've read Ruth, a few times at this point, and that has never drawn my attention, or like I didn't catch that. And so that, to me, when you're saying that, I'm like, gosh, that just makes the genealogy of Jesus even greater.
I know.
Than that.
I know.
That,
and scholars point back to Jesus being our kinsman redeemer, coming to like rescue / ransom us when we were without a home or a tribe or a family, that he has stepped in to do that. So there's lots of parallels on that, Jesus being our kinsman redeemer. So for lack of time, I just like cut some of that, but
so good.
It's the good
that
stuff.
was good.
Yeah.
I think one thing I had never caught before, I've read, it's only 4 chapters, so people read Ruth all the time, just like, you know.
And I think that's probably why, like, they didn't
skim over some of the details.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that it took Boaz 2 harvest cycles to even, like, he just was not about to take action.
Because he wasn't next in line, probably.
I don't know. He didn't even open the conversation.
Some guys, they need some help.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
Anyhow, for Naomi to nudge him, I felt like, it was appropriate. It was timely. Some people were like, do you feel like she was putting her on display or having her be like this temptress or whatever? And it's like, no, I just think that maybe he needed one more glass of wine and he needed her, in a pretty new dress. And then he was like, oh, okay, I'm into you. Like, let's make this work.
Sounds like Elmer in our game.
Yeah.
What?
The game that him and I played.
We played it. Yeah.
To
save time.
Right.
He might have just had commitment issues, man. All right. Some guys, they need.
I know.
How many times girls, like, moms ask, when is he going to propose? It's like,
right.
No, we've been together for 10 years. I have no idea.
And he was older. So it wasn't, or maybe he could have been a young guy who had inherited all that wealth, but the way the story is written makes you think he's older. He refers to her as daughter, which is like not a demeaning term, but more like an endearing term that you would say to somebody who is younger than you, not your peer. But anyhow.
Yeah.
So I wonder what was taking him so long.
Well, what I appreciated about your message yesterday was the amount of time that you did commit to contextualizing and making this story from the Old Testament understandable and relatable, because right off the bat there's a few barriers, like we're not living in an agrarian society. Like, we don't really, like, we have a little bit of knowledge about harvests and what it means to work on a farm, but then also I really appreciated, because I never had thought about what you called, quote unquote, the insurance program, which I think adds layers of maybe not there's a new understanding, but more of an appreciation. And one of the things that I think most Christians struggle with when we read the Bible is to not glorify or put some of these characters on pedestals, because we know that the glory goes back to God. But I still think that a lot of these people that we read about can be role models, right? You see this whole, no, I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to hang out here. I'm not going to go back to my family. That's very admirable. And that's something that you can look up to and maybe not say, wow, all the glory goes to this person, but you can look at it and say, that's really cool. That's the way that I should live my life. And it still doesn't glorify this human, but you can see the Christ-likeness or the God-likeness in them.
It's funny that you say that too, because I believe this would happen. Dear God, don't let this happen. But if something...
You're thinking of your mother-in-law now?
No, opposite actually. Yeah. Like, if something happened to me, like, I'm like 100% confident Audrey would go back to California, go back to Modesto, go be like to her family again. Like, if something happened to me, there's really nothing keeping Audra in Washington in this area. So I look at in the story of Ruth, it's like, man, she could have like went back to her family. Like, that would have been an easy choice.
And the writer who everyone believes is Samuel, because he wrote Judges and then Ruth, and the two books almost could be considered one.
Yeah.
But there's no shame on the gal who did go back to her
Orpah,
homeland.
right?
Like there is no blame or anything. I feel like it was God propelling or enabling Ruth to do that kind of out of the ordinary act. I think it wasn't so much that Ruth was like an all-star, although she's super great.
Yeah.
But I think it was God's purpose that was motivating her. So if Audra decided to stay in Washington for some reason and like she just felt compelled, I would think it was the Lord having a plan for her there.
Yeah, because it would make all sense in the world.
Absolutely.
For her to go home.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's one of the other necessary pieces of context, right? Because you see whether it's divorce or a death, becoming a widow, that's not as common. It's still somewhat common. Like you said with Audra, she probably moved back to California, but there's a lot of men or women, right, who would say, I kind of made a life for myself up here. I'm going to stick around. Whereas that was very countercultural for someone to stick around in the area, right? If something happens, you go right back to your family. That was the way that the world worked at that point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've even asked a question about myself. Again, God, please don't let anything happen to Audra.
Yeah.
But if something happened to Audra, I'm like, would I go home? I don't think I'd go home.
Yeah.
That's interesting if it's different for male, female.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't feel like I'd go home.
And then the component of them being foreigners, you know, too, like California to Washington or whatever.
Kind of cousins.
But, you know, it was either Naomi was going to be the foreigner and live out her days away from her homeland, or it would be Ruth.
Yeah.
So, and Ruth had more years to go. So I don't know. I just think God compelled them because he knew he had a plan for them to be in Bethlehem, for them to meet Boaz, for her to be part of the genealogy of Jesus, etc., fulfilling.
Yeah.
Which then goes to your last truth.
Yeah.
Of which I remember it, but like you can probably say it a lot better.
Yeah. Why don't you just take a stab at it?
God.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yes, his loving kindness towards us.
Yeah.
Right. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Where you talked about there was famine and then there was plenty. Is that what you said? Famine and plenty. Widowed to married. Barren to pregnant.
The child. Yeah.
Was there another one?
I think you hit all the top ones.
Okay. Hayden, I think Hayden's looking.
Poverty to plenty. Yeah.
I was
that was
Yeah.
Poverty to plenty. Yeah. So so like you said, it was God. And then I loved how you had everybody. You told everybody, look in the rear view mirror and see that God has been working towards something, and then a reminder that if things are a little hard right now, that maybe this is going to be the thing in your rear view mirror looking back.
That's what I hope, because even knowing that Ruth had 10 years of barrenness, she probably was like, why does this not happen a little faster?
Yeah.
But if she had had a child in that time, I don't know, would she have gone? Would she have made the trip to go meet Boaz? I mean, maybe God could have just done whatever he wanted, but was there something about that family line and having the firstborn with Boaz so that it would be part of the lineage?
Now I have a question about that.
Well,
your crown sharer, what is it called?
Yeah.
Kinsman Redeemer.
Oh, that one.
Oh, the kinsman redeemer.
Yeah. So Ruth wasn't she was a foreigner. So did she have to follow the same rules? So was the kinsman redeemer actually
I think it was because of Naomi and her son. So it was to preserve the son's lineage.
Okay. So she kind of just accepted that, even though she was a foreigner, to follow that rule. Okay.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask, because I feel like everything in the Bible is useful and beneficial, but a lot of times
Profitable for teaching.
Yeah, exactly. But I would ask this question: This is completely hypothetical, but let's say that this is an isolated story and that, let's say, Ruth and Boaz and all of that doesn't actually fit into Jesus' lineage, right? So if you were to remove the easiest answer of why is Ruth in the Bible? Oh, because it's part of Jesus' lineage. Would you still find all the useful, I mean, obviously the Ruth's truths, right? But, or the truths from Ruth. Do you still see a large value in it outside, let's say we pull those two out of Jesus' lineage, and this is just a story of, this is a really cool story in the Bible. Do you still see the value of it being there?
I think no story is wasted where God is glorified. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like God's glorified in the story.
Yeah.
I feel like he lined up all of the people necessary, the circumstances, and then, even if it was an ordinary miracle, like a family came together, they were diverse, they came together, and nobody was alone. I think that's a beautiful miracle, and I think that's something that is worth telling. Some of us, that's our highest hope, right? Is that we would find ourselves in a family and not live this life alone. So even if Jesus wasn't like the outcome of the lineage thing, I still think there's a lot of beauty.
Yeah, for sure.
To this.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Because one day I would love, if I had the time and energy and extra time, to just compare and contrast.
I thought you were going to say read the 4 chapters of Ruth.
Yeah, honestly, that's the biggest thing. I'm like, this is a lot of reading.
Right.
If I ever find the time.
Well, I would like to be able to compare and contrast the Jewish teachings and historical texts versus what we have in our Bible, right? Because there's a lot of trying to think the right word, crossover. Like there's a Venn diagram of what is in the Jewish teaching, what's in the Christian teaching, and we have a certain amount of books that we both learn from, right? Because when the Jewish people were putting together these texts, they had no idea that Ruth was going to be a part of Jesus' lineage, right? And as Christians now, we know, Ruth was a part of Jesus' lineage. It'd be interesting to see like what gets left out from our text because we're just like, we don't need it. But then what's in addition to the Jewish teaching and what they include in their canon of holy texts. So also, one of the things I got sidetracked with was when we were talking about California and Washington. I was just trying to figure out like what would be the Old Testament geography, and it's about the distance from Jerusalem to Egypt or to like the Gaza Strip. So
Really?
Yeah, it's because the United States is so big.
California to Washington is Gaza to Jerusalem.
It's actually shorter from Jerusalem to Gaza than it is.
What part of California? What part of Washington?
That's the tough part. If we're saying Modesto, it's still Seattle. Modesto is still farther apart than Egypt or the Gaza Strip and
so it's probably like the
Jerusalem.
border of California to the southern border of so pretty much Oregon.
So just like a little when you're thinking about
I know.
the Old Testament geography.
I did that a little bit when I was considering how far it was from Bethlehem to Moab.
Yeah.
And I forget where it was considerable distance. It wasn't just like a neighboring country. It was like 2 countries over.
Well, and just the necessary contextualization of it all, right? Of I looked at the mileage, but it's like, it's only like an 8-hour car ride versus on a donkey or on a horse or walking. That was light years away.
With elevation.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you like that? That was my risk that I took.
Yeah, that was a huge risk.
We were talking about youth pastor and a female pastor, different risks that we're able to take when we speak. And I decided to go ahead and use that term it was out of Logos Bible Software. Sorry, I know, whatever. But anyhow, I thought I'm just going to go ahead and use it and take a risk and not be.
Everybody laughed. It was good.
Yeah.
More than just getting a laugh, I hope it like gives people some sort of like another hook to hang the knowledge on. You know, like I'll remember that somehow.
I mean, I'm gonna go to Home Depot and like, hey, can I get an ass load of this, please?
They're like,
what?
are you being crass, or are you talking about the
Well,
donkey's carrying capacity?
Watch, there's gonna be one worker Home Depot who's like a super bibiblical,
Yeah.
in-depth like Bible study man. It's like, oh, I got it for you. Don't
Yeah.
worry. I'm like,
I know.
oh man,
BRB.
what?
Yeah.
I was like, how much did I just order?
They just have a chart in the back room of like Noah's directions for building the ark, and they're like, oh yeah. Yep.
There's an ass load for you.
I
Yeah.
know. I opened my email very carefully this morning
Yeah.
because I don't know, would complaints come straight
Yeah.
to me? Would they go to, above me?
Mhm.
I had an elder approach me afterwards, and I thought, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Little church discipline for Alison. But
Yeah.
no, he just laughed. So.
So I have one more historical question for you. Was this the same land that David was working when?
Oh, you mean in Bethlehem?
Well, was that so? Is that where
They end up in Bethlehem.
they do end up in Bethlehem?
Yeah, Boaz.
Okay, so the field that Ruth was working at was not the same field that David was working at when God put His Spirit on.
That is
David.
very interesting. I mean, I pictured Boaz's fields as being like level ground
Mhm.
and sun exposure. I pictured David more like in hills
Mhm.
or pasture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, would that same territory be passed down through these guys?
It was Ruth, Boaz,
Mhm.
and then Jesse.
It was Ruth, or so it was Ruth and Boaz. It was Obed.
Obed
Was the child they had. Jesse, David.
and then David.
Mhm.
So somehow they could have moved land in those generations, which doesn't seem like that likely.
That's so interesting.
We
that.
have nerded out about context and history. I would like to actually spend like our last 5 minutes talking about the message in some
Application.
some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
One of the things that happened yesterday before the service was a miscommunication between myself and you, Allison, because I put the slides together during the week, and sometimes I look at your guys' manuscripts and I kind of use my own discretion on like, I'll do this or that. One of the things that I did was I didn't put numbers on your truths from Ruth, right? And then you wanted to go reverse order. When you told me that on Sunday morning, I was like, cool, that's what she wants. Let's do it. I think it'd be cool right now for you to kind of tell us, Bryan, myself, and the listeners, what was the reasoning on wanting to number them and then actually reveal them in reverse order? I'd like to hear your thought behind that.
So when I first laid out my outline, I went in chronological order to tell the story.
Yeah.
And I had to start with Naomi.
Yeah.
And had to then start with Ruth's. I mean, it was chronological is how I had laid it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized as I was doing that, if I had saved the best for last, God would be number 4 instead of number 1.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to reorder the
Yeah.
numbers so that he would end up being number 1.
Yep.
Because really, all of those other points were
Mhm.
good, but it wasn't the best.
Yeah.
The best is that God's loving kindness
Mhm.
is orchestrating these
Yeah.
events in our lives and the people of our
Mhm.
lives to
Mhm.
achieve like his purposes and our
Mhm.
good, and it's because he loves us.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I ended up flipping
Yeah.
the numbers around, and I just
No, that's
didn't
cool.
want I
Yeah.
didn't want God to be number 4.
This is
Yeah.
one of the rare moments that you get to see lived out in real time. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last.
I know.
It's
I
one of the
know.
rare moments that
Yeah.
you see it.
I know. And you and I could have talked about inductive and deductive about, could I have re-scripted that in a way
Mhm.
that he still
Mhm.
would have been preeminent,
Yeah.
and then everybody else is like a supporting character
Yeah.
for that. But as the story unfolds in the book of Ruth,
Mhm.
it didn't really lend itself to that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking of this now, but at least for myself, someone who grew up always in the church, always in Bible study, for me, it's not like a check out or, okay, cool, you made it about God. But that's one of the things that I feel like being in so many sermons all of my life is I know that ultimately what we're learning is always going to go back to God or Jesus or the Holy Spirit, right? But for me, the parts where my ears are listening a little bit deeper is when I'm like, oh, one of the points is have a Ruth, be a Ruth, right? It's not the godlike character that's in Ruth, because I know every point's going to point back to God, Jesus, or the Holy Spirit. So I thought it was also interesting to end there too, because we've gotten this cool highlight of here's some role models, which is very valuable for us to learn from and say, okay, today I'm in this scenario and I do need to be like Ruth, or I do need to be like David or Solomon, whatever, right? These characters that we point from. Another thing I was curious about your points is you had Ruth and Naomi, and you said have and be. What was the reasoning for not having a Boaz, but being a Boaz?
I felt like it would tempt people's integrity to say, like, hey, I advise you to go out and find a Boaz. To me, that almost felt weirdly sugar daddy-ish. like, yeah, I'm going to go find somebody to, like,
an older, wealthier man.
I will say, even in your point, be a Boaz, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go do some pickup lines on some widows.
No, but it's like, if you are in a position to be generous or protective, do that. In times of change, like, if you can be generous to the degree that you can be, like an ass load full, like, be that generous, like, pour out, because we're all in periods of change. And it does benefit and support and encourage people to receive generosity. But I can't go tell people, like, go seek that out. That was the weird thing about like, go get one. Go get a Boaz. Seemed weird.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Can you tell me how many ass loads are in a boat ton?
Yeah. A boat ton. The conversion rate is messy, but yeah.
It's the one thing you'll remember.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it goes.
That was our visual aid.
That was it.
Before we get too far off the rails, I just want to open it up to you guys. Anything that you wanted to share or ask or anything before we close out the podcast?
I would love people to examine in the rearview mirror the things that have happened in their lives that have led them to the place that they're at right now, and to see that through the lens of God's hesed, or his loving kindness. One of the joys of preparing this message for me was to have that time to look backwards, and I could pull out loads and loads of examples, and it was really sweet. It was a really kind of sweet time of reflection. So I would want people to see their lives in such a way.
Okay.
It was really funny. Like I told you before we filmed, that was your point. And then I thought, the reason I'm at Arbor is because of an executive pastor I had at Great Lakes in Wisconsin. And yesterday I go... Of all days, I go get ice cream in Seattle, and that executive pastor was there. So she's like, look at the rearview mirror. I'm like, I just need to turn around. There she is.
That's crazy.
So that was
quite literally.
So crazy.
Yeah, that was your sermon just right there in my face.
Well, I think that helps develop our faith. I think it helps develop our spirit of gratitude when we're able to reflect on those things and not just think, oh, that was coincidental, or that was a stroke of luck, or just random. It was like, actually, maybe it was God moving in your life deliberately because he loves you, wants to take care of you. I think that's amazing. So I think, I don't know, for me, that was the sweet part of this sermon. So
yeah, it was a good one.
It was an okay one.
You said it, not me.
Thanks, though.
All right. Well, did you say something, Bryan? Oh, sorry. Well, I think that covers everything. So we're going to wrap things up. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching the Followup podcast, and we will see you guys in